Good morning, everyone. Minister Chan Chun Sing, our guest of honor. My chairman, Mr. Eddie Teo and Mrs. Teo. And of course, all the members of the S.R. Nathan family, particularly Mrs. Nathan. Thank you for being here with us, Mrs. Nathan, and your children and grandchildren. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, today is Mr. S.R. Nathan's birthday. So when we planned the book launch, we chose this day, and we spent some time organizing other things around it, including getting the book ready for today. So today is a big day for us. I will just say a few words about Mr. Nathan's involvement with RSIS. Many of you know that when he first came back from Washington, D.C., he was asked by then Minister of Defense, Dr. Tony Tan Keng Yam, to establish the Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies, IDSS. And many of you actually are sitting next to some of the first batch of staff in the Institute who have worked with Mr. Nathan. In fact, Minister Chan Chun Sing was also there, and he used to tell us that he knows all the PowerPoint and plots in the current premises of the RSIS, because he used to go around and help to design and set up the place. So from there, Mr. Nathan worked tirelessly and got various academics, researchers, and some advisor to help move the IDSS to a concrete form. And later, this IDSS became the S. Rajaratnam School of International Study. That was in the year January 2007. So we try our best to remember Mr. Nathan in various ways in the school. And I'm sure my various colleagues in the school are tired of me reminding us all the time about Mr. S.R. Nathan and what he would think about certain subject and how he would do in terms of tackling the challenges before us. But what is most important is that we have a big signboard now in our school premises with the motto, ponder the improbable. So this is Mr. Nathan's creation. He devised this set of words and put it in our head all the time. So today, if you go to IDSS / RSIS, you will be able to see various expression of this ponder the improbable on various parts of our premises. Over the past 2 decades, we have tried to take RSIS to the level that Mr. Nathan have expected. And we are proud to say that today it is one of the leading graduate schools in our Asia-Pacific region, as well as a center of excellence for research. I will leave the details about how we prepare the book that you are seeing today to the 2 editors, Mushahid Ali and Associate Professor Kumar Ramakrishna. But I would just want to say that we started working on this book way back in November 2016, and we have gone through many different permutation of this particular commemorative publication. And I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody involved, the contributors, the various members of the staff in the RSIS, and all the other well-wishers who contributed in one way or another to bringing this book to reality. So thank you very much again, and I'm very happy to see so many of you here to do this launch of the book, Remembering S.R. Nathan, a Mentor for All Seasons. I hope that you will cherish what has been published in there, and some of the things in there are, I would say, have not been seen before elsewhere, and you will find out when you buy the book and go through it yourself. Thank you very much.
Good morning, all. Minister Chan, Mrs. Nathan, and friends of Mr. S.R. Nathan. After the passing of the late Mr. Nathan, last August, several members of the RSIS staff suggested we have a suitable memorial for him. We decided putting together a book to commemorate the man would be fitting. Some colleagues felt that the book should not be confined to his public service, where he made a mark, but should include all aspects of his career. We should also not only refer to his autobiography, An Unexpected Journey, and related publications, but we should tap on the memories and experiences of people who worked with Mr. Nathan or were associated with him. We approached people who were involved with him in the Ministry of Interior and Defense and Ministry of Foreign Affairs to get their first-hand accounts of his service in security and diplomacy and his stint in the Straits Times. In particular, we sought background information of his early years in social service and trade unions. While some were hesitant because of the sensitivity of the subject or their inadequate experience, several were happy to recount their reminiscences in some detail. We learned that Mr. Nathan did not provide mentorship only to Singaporean subordinates. He extended his help and guidance to people he has worked with or encountered elsewhere. Kalimullah Hassan, for instance, recounted Mr. Nathan's help in getting him his job as a Straits Times correspondent in Malaysia. It is an example of the impact Mr. Nathan has had on people's lives, at home and abroad. Similar stories are related in the other reminiscences found throughout the book. The chapters in this book reflect the multifaceted nature of Mr. Nathan's public service and his unstinting assistance to one and all. We thank the contributors, some of whom are present today, for their memoirs. We commend their stories in the volume to be launched today. They are a fascinating potpourri of anecdotes and recollections of Mr. Nathan as a colleague, boss, friend, and above all, mentor in whatever line of work they were in. This is also the reason why we decided to title the book, Remembering S.R. Nathan, a Mentor for All Seasons. We hope it does justice to this outstanding son of Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Chan, Mrs. Nathan and family, friends, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Like many of you here, I've had quite a few stories about interacting with Mr. Nathan. To be honest, in the short time available, I really don't know how to do the man full justice. But because of time, I will just keep it short and, of course, keep it simple. My earliest recollection of Mr. Nathan was as a child, actually. My late father, Mr. K.R. Krishna, he was a civil servant, market and hawkers department inspector, actually. And he and Mr. Nathan knew each other way back, in fact, even before I was born. Our families were also acquainted with one another, but I was too low in the family hierarchy to really know what was going on at that level. In fact, it was much later that I got to know Mr. Nathan when I started working. In fact, it was he who recruited me into IDSS. He was on holiday in London in June 1999 and staying in the Earl's Court area, I remember. Then he called me up for lunch. I was finishing off my PhD in history at Royal Holloway, University of London, in history. And we had Thai food. I remember we had Thai food. It was very, very nice lunch. I would remember lunches. Yes. But he was very kind, and he was telling me about the vision for IDSS. And he emphasized that IDSS should be academically rigorous, but always policy relevant. So this is something I've always kept in mind to this day. My great regret was 3 months later, in September 1999, Mr. Nathan became Singapore's president, so I never got to actually work under him by the time I joined IDSS on 1st February 2000. But he was kind enough to write me a short note to tell me that while he would not be able to work directly with me, he would always keep tabs on my progress in IDSS and later RSIS. I was very touched that such a busy man could actually do that, you know. And he kept his word. When he became president in the decade of the 2000s, from time to time, a few of us would be called, pay a visit to him in Istana. always a bit intimidating to visit him in the Istana, but he was always very nice to me, at least. I must say that during the Istana visits, he imparted very sharp insights on national security, regional and international affairs, and on those occasions when I brought foreign visitors to see him, it was like a masterclass in international relations education. I remember one visit about 10 years ago when he was deeply engaged in discussing Middle Eastern affairs with Mr. Ilan Mizrahi, who was a former Israeli national security advisor and deputy head of Mossad, right? It was literally free education for me. It was an amazing session. So in short, Mr. Naden was a great mentor, and I would say even very much a father figure to me and other academic colleagues in RSIS, even beyond RSIS. So as I was going through the book with Mushahid, preparing the material, learning about all the activities and responsibilities Mr. Naden had to deal with, he reminded me of another president. In fact, the 26th president of the United States of America, Theodore Roosevelt, or Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt, in one of his speeches, once talked about the man in the arena, which I may just briefly quote now. Mr. Roosevelt: "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause." To me, Mr. Naden exemplified this. He was very much the man in the arena. His life and example has inspired me and my colleagues to persevere and press on in the good fight. So when you read the book and learn about the trials and tribulations and pressures Mr. Naden went through in the 1960s with the Labor Relations Unit, later in the 1970s in the Laju hijack episode, after that in MFA in the 1980s, it was Straits Times in the 1990s having to set up the fledgling IDSS from scratch. This was clearly a man whom, as Teddy Roosevelt said, knew the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and who spent himself in more than one worthy cause for the sake of the nation. I would therefore commend this book on Mr. Naden as having the great potential to educate readers on a wide spectrum of issues ranging from foreign affairs, security and intelligence, media and academia to the social services sector. Mr. Naden had a rich and full life, and this book brings that out very well, I think. Together, therefore, with Mushahid, I must thank all the contributors, some who are here, for sharing their reflections on interacting with Mr. Naden. I strongly believe that once readers complete the book, they will understand why we decided to call Mr. S.R. Naden mentor for all seasons, because frankly, that was very much what he was. And that is how we in RSIS will always remember him to be. I hope you get a copy of the book as a way of keeping his memory alive. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mrs. Naden family, friends and colleagues from RSIS, IDSS, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure and also an honor for me to join you here today to launch this book about Mr. Naden's A Mentor for All Seasons. There are two kinds of great men. One kind of great men, or one type of great men, achieve much during their lifetime, and for that, they are great. There's another type of great men who not only achieve much in their life, but inspire many more to go on to achieve great things in life for themselves, their families, and their country. Mr. Naden belongs to the second category. He not only achieved great things in his life for himself, his family, and our country, but more importantly, he inspired generations to come after him to do the same. This is why I am eternally grateful to Mr. Naden for having been my mentor for a great part of my journey in public service. Mr. Naden never set out to teach me, nor never even once used the word mentor for me. As I shared during my eulogy at Mr. Naden's funeral, he would always do so through his actions. He never set out to be my mentor nor my teacher. but he demonstrated and showed me the way through his actions. In the 20 years that I have known Mr. Naden, I have learned many things from him. Perhaps too many for me to recount today, and I'll just focus on two. First is our experience in setting up IDSS, which has now become RSIS. What I can clearly and will always remember is this. The mark of the vitality of an individual, an organization, or a country is not how strong they are, but instead it is how willing, how daring they are to face the unknown. When we are confronted with something that we do not know, including the improbable, when we are confronted with something that we have never done before, what will be our reaction? And what should be our reaction? Mr. Naden has always, through his action, shared with us that the vitality of the individual and organization of a country is how willing and how bold you are to go forward towards meeting the challenges of the unknown. This was how he set up IDSS. This was how he did many things for this country in life. Together with his generation of pioneer leaders, none of them will ever ask, has someone else done this before? Has there been a precedence for me to follow? But instead, for every new challenge that they come across, they saw it as an opportunity to do something different, something better, something that will stamp their mark in the history for our nation. This is the kind of spirit that we in the younger generation hope to emulate as we go forward. That for each and every generation, we too can become the pioneers of a new era for a better and stronger Singapore going forward. This is something that we hope we will never lose. That we will never one day go down the way as some other countries and organizations do, which is that when they are confronted with a challenge, they freeze with trepidation, asking, has someone else done it before? Is there an example for me to do so? And if there is no previous example, that they will not know how to proceed. But instead, we hope that for every individual, every organization, and our country, that when faced with new challenges, we will always see it as an opportunity to stamp our mark in the history of our country, if not the history of mankind. This kind of boldness is something that I will remember from Mr. Naden's mentoring all these years. The second story that I'd like to share is a very simple one. Through my life and my work in MSF, the Ministry of Social and Family Development, through my work in NTUC, Mr. Naden has always been the first to come and share with me some of the lessons that he garnered during his service to the social service sector and the union and the labor movement. And for both MSF and the labor movement, the lesson was a very simple one. And that was just always remember the common man. Always remember the common man. That when we are in doubt as to what is the best course of action, always start from the interests of the common man. And he told us that if we remember this and if we keep to this, we will not get very far wrong. Because it is the common man that we serve. It is the common man that will give us the support and enable us to do great things in life. And for everything that we do in Singapore, it is not just for ourselves, for our family, or for our organization, but it is ultimately for the common man. And it behooves us to always remember Mr. Naden's words that we must never, never forget the common man, because it is the common man who serves, whom we serve, and it is the common man who will make this country great together with the leaders and everyone else. So today, I also want to thank RSIS and the two editors, Mushahid and Associate Professor Kumar. Today, we have added another piece to the collective memory of Singapore. Whenever I travel in the US and other countries, I've always been very impressed by how they have assiduously, over the years, collected bits and pieces of their history, written in simple ways to be shared with future generations. It could be the great works of some of the presidents and prime ministers. It could be the work of the common folk who just made a special contribution on a certain occasion to help the country move forward. All this help our collective memory and gives us a sense of history. And as a young nation, which is just barely 52 years old, these are all the more important. And I hope today's work will not only remind us of Mr. Naden's contribution to us as a mentor, as a statesman, but today's launch of this book will also encourage even more Singaporeans to come forth and share their memories of how we have gone through the last 52 years. That all this collectively will serve to inspire many more generations of Singaporeans to come forth to serve the country to the best of our ability. So once again, I'd like to thank RSIS and IDSS for embarking on this effort and adding to our collective memory. But most importantly, I'd like to thank Mr. Naden and his family for all these years of public service, to thank Mr. Naden for not only achieving great things in his life, but for inspiring us to try to achieve even greater things in our life for ourselves, our families, but most importantly, our country. Thank you very much.